Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC Vegas 109, headlined by Anthony Hernandez and Roman Dolidze. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. Now, listen, we're coming off a nice, profitable evening last weekend. 3-1 on plays, hit the 4% best bet play. And if you want to become a client, link down in the description. Already have 3 plays locked in for clients. Have another 4%er that I am going to be hammering this weekend. And again, we'll be adding to that as we get closer to fight night. Check out the link down below. But with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Anthony Hernandez and Roman Dolidze. Now, you got Hernandez sitting around minus 370. On the comeback here, we've got Dolidze plus 270. Now, you look at Hernandez here, fluffy, and he is the definition of what weaponizing your cardio means. He's just able to go out there and be an absolute cardio machine. He moves forward. He's going to be relentless with it. He's going to stay in your face. He's going to smother you up against the fence, have that smothering pressure, and really just keep you there. Really let you kind of hold you there, keep you there, get ground control, get top control, and really just melt his opponent. And he's been able to really tire these guys out, and it's worked out well for him. At times it can, be a little sloppy where he just is relentlessly shooting, but he has that cardio to fuel these repetitive takedowns. And we have been betting him. He's definitely a guy that we have been kind of leaning on in certain spots here. And the thing about it on the other side here with Dolidze is the fact that Dolidze is an elite level grappler. He's a big guy overall, elite level grappler when the fight gets to the ground. He has a 33% takedown defense rate, but it's because he doesn't mind the fight being down. He really believes in his grappling ability. He really is confident in it. And we've seen how elite it is. We've seen it against multiple opponents, these slick reversals that he has, these slick sweeps, these transitions that are very tricky. And it almost seems like there's spots where it looks like he's never going to get out of it, and he's able to get out of it. And it's just Roman is just, once he's on the ground, there is a high level to him there. And then you also look at it as I do think Roman is kind of in career best shape. The guy's getting older, but he has looked pretty damn good, physically. And then also you're looking at what he's doing in the cage. His cardio is a little bit, I think, more holding up over the last few fights. So, I think there is that aspect to it. But fluffy at this price, I think is wide. And I also do think that fluffy at this price, there's some holes in his game. There's definitely some holes in his game. And I think the first thing being the fact that he can be hurt. And, that's something that I think probably a lot of people are going to touch on, but that's definitely something that we've seen him hurt to the body multiple times. And not only that, we've seen Pereira go out there and throw a nice body kick, hurt him. We've seen him in multiple spots, hurt early. He is tough enough to get through those. So credit to, Fluffy. He's able to kind of push through some of those things. We even saw Edmund Shabazian, threaten to choke on him and get him to the ground. I mean, there are these moments that Fluffy, you're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Again, he's going to be relentless with the takedowns. But you look at Dolidze, and he really is going to have the strength and physicality advantages in this spot here. Plus, he's going to have big time finishing upside. This guy has big power in his hands. We've seen him, throw those bombs. And then you also have the ability to have the submission game. And that is really where I think this is going to be a very interesting fight, is because most of the time, opponents don't want to take Roman down. They're not comfortable taking him down. We have seen guys obviously take him down, but even Hermansson's looking to take him down. I think he got 2 takedowns. One of them was kind of, more Roman kind of allowing it to happen because he was trying to sink in a choke. But even there, goes to the ground, and all of a sudden Roman, finds a reversal, and all of a sudden he ends up submitting Hermansson. So, or no, he was dropping bombs on him. He could have submitted him with a calf slicer, but either way, it's a spot where if this fight gets to the ground and you have Fluffy, who is going to go into the lion's den. He is going to, a lot of guys don't want to take him down. He is going to do that. He's going to consistently do that. And I think that opens up Roman opportunities to latch in something, sink something in. At times, I think that you can see Fluffy, who can be a little sloppy. Again, he has that cardio. He's got that toughness. He can push through adversity. And a lot of those things do work for him. But against Roman, who I think is the better striker, the harder hitter, going to have the strength advantage overall, the biggest advantage, and it's a big advantage, is the cardio. But outside of that, the more damaging shots are going to be coming from Roman. I think that Roman's scrambling ability, his threatening ability to have the submissions or find a knockout, I think there's a lot of things he can do very well in this spot. And then you look at the price tag here, and you're looking at, a guy who's minus 370. I think this line is too wide here. I think Roman is the side. I think all the value really lays on him in this spot here. He's got finishing upside. He's going to have some, physicality advantages. And plus, he really can counter, I think, some of the things that Fluffy does well, especially early if Fluffy's looking for those takedowns. So in this spot, I am going Roman Dolidze to get the job done. And the next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Eisman Lucindo. She is minus 215. On the comeback here, we have Angela Hill. She is plus 178. Now, this is really going to be, a young up-and-comer in Lucindo. And then on the other side, you've got Angela Hill, the UFC vet, who's been around for a very long time. Now, you look at the ages, and that's the first thing that really sticks out to me in this fight, is the fact that Lucindo was 23 years old, and you've got Hill, who's 40. And that kind of wide gap, it obviously, statistically speaking, if you're blindly betting, a fighter, you're talking about 10 years or more, yes, the younger fighter wins at a pretty high clip. But with that being said, you look at Angela Hill, and I think that she's looked pretty good. At that time, you're kind of looking at 40 years old. Can out of nowhere a big decline happen? Yes, it can. So there is that kind of part to it. But you also look at it that she's a crafty vet. She's a crafty vet with a lot of experience. She has faced the who's who of the division throughout her career, and Lucindo is just kind of starting to get to that point. Now, obviously, they're in different places in their career. You got one at 23, one at 40. That's kind of heading towards the end, but still, you're seeing, Hill. She's 3-1 out of her last 4 fights, and she's always making it competitive. And that, to me, is where you start to see some value here, is because, her win margins are not that big and her losing margins are not that big. So she's really in most of these fights, and she's scrappy, she's well-rounded, and she's very light on her feet. And that kind of mixture with having some vet savviness is tough for some opponents. She's been able to go out there and beat some younger females, some that may say, hey, look, this is a washed up Angela Hill, and she's really just pushing the pace. And that's one thing that I think is a biggest advantage really for Angela Hill in this spot, is going to be of her high volume. She pushes fight after fight. Even now, we are seeing Angela Hill push out an absurd volume, very high volume. She's always out there putting something out there for the judges to look at. Stat-wise, she lands double the significant strikes landed per minute compared to Lucindo. If you look at the numbers there, it's Angela Hill. She lands nearly 6 significant strikes per minute, while you have Lucindo landing under 3 per minute. And I think that's a big time problem here, because you look at Angela Hill, she's going to push out that volume. She's going to stay in your face. And Lucindo's been very low volume. She is going to have the power advantage. In Lucindo, she is going to be able to have that and maybe cause some of the more damaging shots. But I think that Hill, with that pressure, with that volume, is going to be a lot, I think, for Lucindo to really overcome. Plus, you also add in the fact that I do think that, we know that Lucindo is going to look for some takedowns, and she might get them. And you do see Hill, I think, have some scrambling ability, but I think Hill can be offensive with takedowns. I think she can find an opportunity to start to level change. And you've seen her over the last few fights really kind of implement that and mix it in very well. Over her last 4 fights, she has 9 takedowns, and she's been able to go out there and really bank some rounds and mix it up, keep the opponent off balance. And we've also seen Lucindo, if she doesn't get the takedown and she's taken down, she's not very good off of her back. There's times where she can be controlled off her back, and those are the things I think, and we saw her recently against Limoges like that. I do think that opens up some opportunities here for Angela Hill to find success on the feet, land, the volume. And if there are, points where Lucindo is going to be shooting, I think that Hill can defend, or she can kind of implement her own takedown. So I think this is another spot where I got to take the plus money here. I got to go Angela Hill at plus 178. And the next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Elijah Smith, minus 700. On the comeback here, we've got Kazama. He is plus 475. Now, in my opinion, this is an absolute smash spot for Smith. Now, obviously, the line's indicating that. We're looking at a minus 700 here. But I think this is a spot here to really just kind of, add to what really Smith can do. And again, he's another young, up-and-coming fighter. And you look at Kazama, overall, I don't even think he's UFC caliber. He's a very one-dimensional guy. He's got jiu-jitsu, doesn't have really any wrestling ability, not really to speak of. And also the fact he's got terrible striking. I mean, really, really bad striking. I mean, it's wild. He moves forward with his head on the center line. He has no defense, no real combinations or no process to his striking when he's moving forward. And that's a huge issue here. And the other big issue is the fact that, he's very hittable and he's chinny and he has been slapped around a lot. You look at it here. Now, out of all of his UFC fights, he's only had 3. Out of all 3 UFC fights, he's been dropped. And in one of them, he's been dropped twice. So out of 3 UFC fights, he's been dropped 4 times. And 2 of which he was knocked out in the first round. So again, not a guy that's durable, guy that's chinny, the guy that can be hit. And you also look at it out of his 4 career losses, 3 were by knockout. So this is a guy who's there to be hit and who can be knocked out. And one of the things I thought was interesting was, his fight against Gregorius, which was a fight where, Gregorius is not good. He's another guy that just is very low level guy. And he was teeing off on Kazama early in their fight there. If you look at stats landed, it was 26 significant strikes to 2 favoring Gregorius. And, after he was dropped, you saw Kazama, he was able to throw up a triangle choke, get the finish, kind of a meme-like situation where he was kind of getting his butt kicked. And I think that's really an only way he finds any type of victory is kind of these meme type finishes here. But you also look now at, Elijah Smith. The guy is athletic. He's very explosive, has the power. He's the far better hitter, harder hitter between the 2 of them, picks his shots very well. And one of the things also you got to look at is not just the fact that he's going to have, on the feet, the better striking, the harder hitter, the faster hands. All those things are going to obviously very much be on the side of Elijah Smith. But one of the things I think is going to even probably help this more is the fact that he's a strong wrestler. And that starts to pin me to a certain, method of victory here. And Kazama needs takedowns. There's no doubt this guy needs takedowns in order to find any type of success here, in order to start utilizing his grappling. I don't think that Smith is going to dive in for takedowns. He might, but I don't think he's really going to look to do that here. I think he's going to probably want to keep this on the feet, knowing that he's the far better striker. And yes, the jiu-jitsu is on the Kazama side, but I think that if he can't get any types of takedowns here, he is going to be getting hit, and he's going to be getting hit very, very hard early in this fight here. Kazama has a negative striking differential. I think this is a spot here where Elijah Smith is going to absolutely knock the shit out of Kazama. And getting off the minus 700 number here, you can get Smith inside the first 2 rounds by knockout, sitting around minus 135. I think that is an absolutely great price. I think there's a high probability he knocks him out in the first round, but getting the first two rounds at minus 135, I think he gets the job done, puts a stamp on it, gets a little highlight reel knockout for him moving forward here in the UFC. So we're going Elijah Smith knockout inside the first 2 rounds at minus 135. And the last one here we're going to go over is going to be Jocelyn Edwards. She is minus 350. On the comeback, we have Priscilla Cachoeira plus 255. Now, when Edwards first came to the UFC, I was just very low on her and not high on her at all. I'm not saying I'm really high on her right now, but you are seeing her get better. She came into the UFC when she was like 25 years old. Over the last 4 some odd years, she has really been able to kind of add to her tool set, kind of look to round out her skill set a little bit. You're seeing her get better, kind of fight after fight, especially recently. You're really seeing her start to get better overall. Now, on the other side here, you've got Priscilla Cachoeira, the zombie girl. And, they don't call her zombie girl for nothing. I mean, this girl comes forward. She's going to, have heavy pressure, and she's going to, really look to, have that volume, but she's going to absorb a ton of damage. And she just doesn't have the ability to really be defensively aware. She's eating punches, and, there's just no real, again, another fighter, there's just no real process. She's wildly swinging, leaves her head in the center line, and extremely, extremely hittable, especially now the fact that she's 36 years old. You've got Edwards, she's 29 now. This is the end for Priscilla. I think, this mixing in with some of the issues that she has on her striking differential, she's got a negative striking differential. She lands 4 significant strikes. and absorbs 7 per minute. I think that's a very bad sign here at 36, and this is also on short notice. I think this sets up very largely for Edwards here, and you also got to add in that probably the biggest advantage. I think that Edwards is better everywhere, but I think the takedowns will be there. And that's something that I think she could really lean on in this fight here, that any opponent that's really looked to take Priscilla down has been able to take her down. And you kind of look at when she's been taken down, she doesn't know what the heck she's doing. She has no grappling, no get up game, no submission threat, nothing really that she has. And I think Edwards, who's going to be the bigger female here, can really, gain some control, ground and I think there'll be a point, maybe she even has a choice to say, hey, am I going to look to submit her? Or am I going to look to just pound her face and get this fight finished here? And, I think that's a big problem here. Plus, you also look to the fact that Priscilla, out of her 6 losses, 4 are by submission. So I think you know that the path is there. The takedown abilities are there overall. I think that Edwards gets these takedowns, gets control time, can start to land the more damaging shots and find that finish. So getting off of the minus 350 number, if you take Edwards inside the distance at plus 185, I think is another great price here. I just don't see Priscilla making it to the end here. I think the short notice aspect of this, her age at this particular point, I think it's all coming to an end for her here. I think Jocelyn is starting to surge a little bit. I think she finds that finish inside the distance at plus 185. So there you have it for my plays for UFC Vegas 109. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Again, I've got a 4% play up right now, 3 plays all together. We're going to keep this train going, keep this cash train rolling, and I'll see you next week. Let's cash.